The morning sun hung low over Fort Liberty, casting long shadows across the baseball diamond where the morning game was just getting started. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the field, watching the other soldiers warm up. She wore the standard Army physical training uniform like everyone else, but there was something about the way she held herself, still, centered, ready, that most people missed. Sarah had just arrived at Fort Liberty 3 weeks ago. She'd transferred from her previous assignment at Naval Station San Diego, and like most new arrivals, she'd kept her head down and tried to blend in. She didn't talk much about her background. She didn't mention her service. She just worked hard, showed up on time, and did her job without complaint. The thing was, nobody really knew who Sarah was. Sergeant Marcus Webb noticed her first. He was the unofficial ringleader of the morning baseball group, a barrel-chested guy with a loud laugh who'd been at the base for 5 years. He didn't mean to be cruel. Marcus was actually pretty good-natured most of the time. But he had that kind of personality where jokes came easy, sometimes easier than kindness. "Hey, look who showed up," Marcus called out to his buddies, nodding towards Sarah. "The quiet one, the weird transfer." A few of the other soldiers turned to look. There were about 15 guys standing around the diamond that morning, plus Sarah. It was a casual pickup game, the kind that happened most mornings before the real work of the day began. "She going to play?" asked Private Jake Duncan, a younger guy, maybe 23 or 24. "I guess she's going to stand there and look mysterious," another soldier laughed. His name was Henderson. He was one of the guys who'd made a point of avoiding Sarah since she arrived. Nothing mean about it, he just didn't know how to talk to her, so he mostly didn't try. Sarah walked onto the field. She carried a glove in her hand. She didn't say anything. She never said much. "Okay, Chen, you're on my team," Marcus said, more as a command than an invitation. "You can play outfield. Just stand there and try not to mess it up." There were some chuckles. Sarah just nodded. She moved into position without a word. Here's what nobody on that base knew. Sarah had grown up the daughter of a baseball coach in Portland, Oregon. Her father had taught her the game before she could read. She'd played in college. She'd played for fun in every duty station she'd been assigned to. She'd also spent the last 8 years as a Navy SEAL, one of the most highly trained combat operators in the United States military. But Sarah didn't advertise that. She barely talked about it at all. The game began. The pitcher, a guy named Cooper, wound up and threw. The batter, one of Henderson's teammates, connected. The crack of the bat echoed across the field. The ball flew high and hard toward right center field. It was a solid hit, the kind that would land for extra bases if nobody got to it. Sarah was moving before the ball reached the top of its arc. She ran with the kind of precision and power that came from years of tactical training, from running in full gear through deserts and mountains, from training where lives depended on your ability to move fast and move right. She reached the ball at the last second, extending her glove, her body angling perfectly. She made the catch look easy, seamless, like she'd been tracking it from the moment it left the bat. The field went quiet for just a second. Then Marcus started clapping. "Not bad, Chen, not bad at all." The game continued. 2 innings went by without incident. Sarah played well, better than well. She hit a double in her first at-bat. She made another diving catch that drew actual whistles of appreciation from some of the guys. But mostly people just started to forget about her being new, being quiet, being different. By the 3rd inning, things had shifted. Sarah wasn't the joke anymore. She was just one of the guys, which was exactly how she preferred it. That's when Marcus started running the bases. He'd hit a single to left field. It was a clean hit, nothing special, but he was running hard, looking to stretch it into a double. As he approached second base, the ball came in from the outfield. The cutoff throw was coming toward Sarah, who was backing up the base. Marcus was sliding hard. He was sliding the way guys do in casual games, not worrying too much about how rough it was. He came in fast and dirty, the kind of slide that was more show than safety. Sarah caught the throw just as Marcus's cleats came toward her. Instead of moving out of the way, instead of being careful, she didn't shift her stance. She planted her feet. She made the tag clean and professional, exactly the way it's supposed to be done in any real game. Marcus hit the ground hard. He didn't slide into the base. He slid into Sarah's legs. For a moment he lay in the dust, stunned. Then he got up, brushing himself off, his face red. "You trying to break my legs?" he shouted, but there was no real anger in his voice. He was embarrassed more than anything. He'd been beaten fair and square. Sarah didn't respond. She tossed the ball back to the pitcher. She stood in her position, waiting for the next play. "That's a good call," one of the other soldiers said, a guy Sarah barely knew. "That's the right way to play it." But something had changed in Marcus's expression. He didn't like being shown up. He didn't like being outplayed by the quiet girl nobody really knew. And worse, he didn't like being beat in front of his buddies. "Just a game, Chen," he said, dusting off his uniform with more force than necessary. "Don't need to get so serious about it." Sarah caught the next ball that came her way. She threw a runner out at second. She was playing textbook-perfect baseball, the kind of game someone plays when they actually know what they're doing. The game ended an hour later. Marcus's team had lost by 2 runs. As the guys were collecting their things and heading back inside for the day's actual duties, Marcus huddled with Henderson, Jake, and a couple of the other soldiers. Sarah didn't hear what they were saying. She just grabbed her glove and her water bottle and headed back toward the barracks. But later that week, she would find out exactly what Marcus had said. He'd made a joke about how the new girl needed to learn her place. He'd suggested that someone should take her down a peg or two. He'd said, in that way that guys sometimes do when they're feeling embarrassed and want to save face with their friends, that they should teach her a lesson. None of them realized who they were talking about teaching a lesson to. None of them knew that the quiet girl in the outfield had spent the last 8 years learning how to do things that would have horrified anyone who actually understood what was involved. They didn't know that Sarah had run operations in places they couldn't find on a map. They didn't know that she had the training, the discipline, and the capability to make a man like Marcus Webb wish he'd never opened his mouth. All they knew was that a new transfer had shown them up at baseball, and for some guys, that was enough. For some guys, that was reason enough to decide that something needed to be done about it. Sarah sat in her small room in the barracks that evening. She had her laptop open, and she was reviewing some reports for a training exercise scheduled for the next month. She was going back to her regular job Monday. She'd just been on temporary assignment helping with base logistics. She didn't think much about the baseball game. In her world, showing your skills was just part of the work. She didn't expect congratulations for doing things correctly. She didn't expect special treatment or attention. She also didn't expect what was about to happen. But she was more prepared for it than anyone could have possibly imagined. The next week passed quietly. Sarah continued her routine. Up at 5:30 a.m., physical training until 6:30, shower, breakfast, then work. She spent her days in the operations office, reviewing logistics and helping coordinate training exercises. It was administrative work mostly, but it was important work. Everything that happened on the base at some level flowed through the coordination office. She was good at the job. Her previous commanding officer had recommended her specifically for this position. He'd told the base commander, "Lieutenant Chen is one of the most reliable officers I've ever worked with. She doesn't make mistakes. She doesn't need supervision. She just gets things done." That kind of attention to detail and professionalism didn't always win you friends, though. Some people resented competence. Some people saw quiet confidence as arrogance. Some people, especially people like Marcus Webb, saw a woman who didn't need them as a threat. Friday morning came. The weekly baseball game started like it always did. Sarah was invited to play, which had become normal by now. She'd earned her place on the field through simple competence. This time, though, something was different. There were more people watching. Henderson had apparently spread the word that the game was happening. There were maybe 25 soldiers gathered around by the time things got started. It wasn't a huge crowd for a base with thousands of personnel, but it was more than usual. "All right, let's make this interesting," Marcus said, clapping his hands together. He was being loud, performing for the larger audience. "Let's make some real teams. I want to play like we're actually trying to win something." This should have been fine. This was just a casual game. Sarah didn't care about winning or losing. She just wanted to play, to move her body, to enjoy the morning. But something about the way Marcus said it, something about the energy he was projecting, made her pay attention. Her instincts, the same instincts that had kept her alive in some very dangerous places, were telling her something was off. The game started. Sarah was playing outfield again. Her team was winning by the 3rd inning. She'd gotten a hit in her second at bat, another double, and she'd caught 2 fly balls that should have been base hits. In the 4th inning, Marcus was up to bat. He looked over at Sarah before the pitch came. He made eye contact with her. He was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He hit the ball hard. It was toward left field, not toward Sarah's side, but Sarah was ready to back up the position. She was always ready. The left fielder caught the ball easily. Marcus dropped his bat and started running toward first base anyway, just jogging it out. That was normal. That was part of the game. But as he rounded first base, he changed direction. He wasn't going toward second base. He was heading toward Sarah. She saw it coming. Her body recognized the threat before her conscious mind fully processed it. A man who was over 200 pounds was running directly at her, and he wasn't slowing down. Sarah's first instinct was to step out of the way. That's what a normal person does. That's what a normal person should do. She took a step to the left. Marcus adjusted his trajectory. He was going to hit her. That was crystal clear now. Sarah planted her feet. She was going to get hit, or she was going to do something about it. And in that split second, something else came into play. She was tired of being underestimated. She was tired of playing small. She was tired of hiding who she was. Marcus hit her. What he didn't expect was that Sarah didn't go flying backward. What he didn't expect was that she had been training for 8 years how to absorb impacts, how to stay centered, how to control her body in moments when everything was chaos. She didn't fall, she barely moved. Marcus bounced off her like he'd run into a wall. He went down hard, landing on his back in the dust. For a moment, he just lay there, stunned. The entire field went silent. Then Marcus got up, breathing hard, his face red. "What the you stepped into me?" he shouted. "You can't, that's not." "I didn't move into you, Sergeant," Sarah said, her voice calm and level. "I moved out of your way. You changed direction and ran into me." "That's a lie," Marcus said, but his voice was less certain now. His friends knew what they'd just witnessed. They'd seen him run at her, and they'd seen her not fall. "I have a witness," said Private Jake Duncan, who was standing near the baseline. "I saw the whole thing. He ran right at you, Chen. You tried to move out of the way." Marcus's face got even redder. He'd been called out in front of the whole group, and they all knew it. He'd tried to use his size and his strength against someone he thought was just the quiet new girl, and it hadn't worked. "You know what?" Marcus said, straightening up his uniform. "Never mind, this game's stupid anyway." He walked off the field. A few of his buddies followed him, but several of the other soldiers stayed, and they were looking at Sarah with new eyes. "That was something," Henderson said slowly. "The way you just didn't fall." Sarah picked up her glove. "He lost his balance," she said simply. "It happens." But people were talking now. People were wondering. It's hard to witness something like that and not start thinking about what it means. It's hard to see someone that small, Sarah was 5'7", maybe 140 pounds, stand her ground against someone like Marcus without starting to ask questions. Later that afternoon, Henderson was sitting in the mess hall eating lunch with Jake and another soldier named Rodriguez when the conversation turned back to what they'd seen. "Did you see how she just stood there?" Jake said, "like he ran into a brick wall." "She's definitely trained," Henderson admitted. "I mean, nobody just stands there like that unless they know how to brace for impact." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know who she reminds me of? I served with a SEAL team for a few months before I transferred. The way she moves, the way she carries herself, it's the same thing I saw with those guys." "No way," Henderson said. But even as he said it, he was thinking about how Sarah moved, about the way she seemed to exist in her body differently than most people did, about the kind of fitness and control that went beyond normal military training. "I'm just saying," Rodriguez shrugged, "it's a possibility." By the end of the day, rumors were spreading across the base. The quiet girl from the logistics office had thrown Marcus Webb on his back, or so the story went. By the time it got to the ears of some of the junior enlisted men, the story had grown. By the time it reached the ears of a few of the senior NCOs, it had grown even more. One version had Sarah doing an actual throw. Another had her somehow using some kind of technique. The truth, that Marcus had simply run into her and lost his balance, got lost in the retelling. What didn't get lost was the idea that something about Sarah Chen wasn't quite normal. That evening, Marcus sat with Henderson, Jake, and another soldier named Tony in Marcus's room. The door was closed. They were keeping their voices low. "Look," Marcus said, "I'm not saying she did anything wrong. I'm just saying that something's off about her, and I'm not going to be humiliated by some transfer." "It was an accident," Henderson said. "You ran into her, it wasn't her fault." "That's not the point," Marcus said. "The point is that everyone's talking about it. The point is that I'm a sergeant and a new transfer just made me look stupid in front of half the base." "So what are you going to do?" Jake asked, though from his tone it sounded like he might already know. "I'm going to find out who she really is," Marcus said. "I'm going to find out what her deal is, and then I'm going to make sure she knows that you don't just come to a new base and make people look bad." "That's not a good idea," Tony said quietly. "That sounds like a bad idea, actually." But Marcus wasn't listening. His pride was hurt, his ego was bruised, and he had convinced himself that Sarah had somehow done this deliberately, that she had humiliated him on purpose. He didn't know yet that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his military career. Sarah started noticing the signs Tuesday of the following week. Small things, mostly. But in her training, she'd learned to pay attention to small things. In her world, small things often meant the difference between safety and danger. The first sign was that soldiers stopped talking when she walked into rooms. That wasn't unusual, but the quality of their silence was different now. It wasn't the normal social awkwardness of people unsure how to interact with someone quiet. It was the silence of people who were keeping secrets. The second sign was that Henderson, who had always been friendly in a casual way, suddenly became very interested in talking to her. He showed up at her office on Wednesday morning with coffee. "Hey, thought you might want some coffee," he said. Sarah was suspicious immediately. They'd never talked for more than 30 seconds before this. "That's kind," she said carefully. "What's going on?" Henderson sat down in the chair across from her desk. "Look, I'm just going to be straight with you," he said. "Marcus and some of the guys, they've been talking. They're planning something." Sarah's body language didn't change, but her full attention was now on Henderson. "Planning something how?" "I don't know exactly," Henderson said. "But the vibe I'm getting is that they're going to try to embarrass you or prove something. After what happened at baseball, Marcus has been in a mood about it. And Rodriguez made a joke about you maybe being some kind of commando or something, and now Marcus is convinced there's something he doesn't know." "Thank you for telling me," Sarah said. She meant it. "Do you know when or where?" "Not yet," Henderson said. "But Marcus keeps looking at the schedule for the next combat training exercise. It's coming up this Friday. I think that might be when he's planning whatever he's planning." After Henderson left, Sarah sat in her office thinking about this. She could make a report. She could go to her commanding officer and file a complaint about being harassed or threatened. She could shut this down right now with official channels. But she also knew that wouldn't fix anything. It would just make Marcus and his friends more careful, and more importantly, it wouldn't teach them anything. Sarah had learned in her training that sometimes the only way people learned was through direct experience. Thursday afternoon, Sarah was in the gym doing her normal training routine. She was running on the treadmill, keeping her cardio up when Tony, the soldier who'd been in Marcus's room, came and stood next to the treadmill. He looked nervous. "Hey," he said, "I heard what's happening tomorrow." Sarah slowed the treadmill down. "Tell me." "Marcus and some of the guys are going to be paired with you in the combat training exercise," Tony said. "And they've been talking about making it difficult for you, about pushing you too hard, making you look bad in front of the instructors. Henderson told me what he told you, and I figured you should know that they're actually going to follow through with it." "Which instructors are supervising?" Sarah asked. "Captain Torres and Staff Sergeant Miller," Tony said. Sarah nodded. She knew both of them. Good officers, professional people, people who would pay attention if something went wrong. "Thanks for the heads up," Sarah said. "Look," Tony said, and he actually looked troubled. "I'm not trying to get in the middle of this, but I wanted you to know what you're walking into. Marcus is really angry about all this." After Tony left, Sarah finished her workout. She went back to her barracks. She showered. She ate dinner in the mess hall alone, the way she usually did. And then she made a decision. Friday morning came bright and clear. The combat training exercise was scheduled for 800 hours. There were 8 different teams participating, and they would rotate through various scenarios designed to test their tactical thinking, their physical capabilities, and their ability to work together under pressure. Sarah's team consisted of her, Marcus, Henderson, Jake, and 2 other soldiers Sarah barely knew. Captain Torres briefed everyone on the scenarios. They would be running a hostage rescue operation simulation, a perimeter defense exercise, and a search and rescue mission through rough terrain. Teams would be scored on speed, accuracy, and how well they work together. "Remember," Captain Torres said, "this is training. We want to see how you solve problems. We want to see your tactics. We want to see how you handle stress. Be safe, be smart, and do your best." The first exercise was the hostage rescue scenario. Teams would be navigating through a building with simulated obstacles, trying to reach a target while avoiding simulated threats. It was part physical challenge, part puzzle solving. Sarah's team was assigned to go third. While they waited, Sarah noticed that Marcus was talking to the other team members, probably reviewing their strategy. She noticed that he kept looking at her, and there was something about his expression that confirmed what Tony had told her. They were going to test her deliberately. They were going to see how she handled being pushed. When their turn came, the team moved into the building. The first obstacle was a blocked doorway. They needed to find an alternate route or clear the obstruction. Marcus looked at Sarah. "Check the walls," he said, not as a suggestion but as a command. "See if there's another way through." Sarah understood what he was doing. He was setting things up so that she would be the one taking risks, the one getting tired, the one potentially making a mistake. "I'll check the walls," she said calmly. "Henderson, can you check the ceiling?" She didn't ask Marcus. She didn't order him. She just suggested a different strategy. They found a way through by pushing a movable wall panel to the side. It was the faster route anyway, the route Sarah would have suggested if she was actually leading the team. The second obstacle was a physical one, a rope climb of about 30 feet to reach a platform where the hostage was located. The clock was running. The faster they could get there, the better their score. Marcus went first. He was strong and he moved quickly, but he wasn't efficient. He had lots of muscle, but he didn't have the movement training that came from years of tactical operations. He reached the platform in about 90 seconds. Henderson went next. He was a reasonable athlete, made it in about 110 seconds. Jake went third. He was fit but not particularly experienced with rope climbing. He took about 140 seconds, and he was breathing hard when he reached the top. Then it was Sarah's turn. She grabbed the rope and started climbing. Her movements were controlled, powerful, and precise. She used her core and her legs as much as her arms. She wasn't rushing, but she wasn't slowing down either. She was climbing the way a professional climbs. She reached the platform in 65 seconds. Even before her feet hit the platform, she heard someone from another team watching say, "Did you see that?" Marcus's face was different now. The casual confidence was gone. He was starting to understand that something was actually different about Sarah. The third exercise was the search and rescue mission. Teams had to move through terrain, find simulated victims, and extract them. The course was set up on a wooded area about 2 miles from the training grounds. Teams had to navigate using maps and compasses, stay on their timeline, and demonstrate proper rescue techniques. This was where things were going to get real. Captain Torres divided the group. Marcus would be the leader for this exercise. Sarah would be one of the team members. The other soldiers would follow their lead. "Your goal," Captain Torres said, "is to find 3 simulated victims and bring them back to the extraction point. You have 90 minutes. The terrain is rough. Stay alert and stay safe." The team moved into the woods. Marcus was trying to lead, but he'd never been good at reading maps. He kept second-guessing himself, turning them down the wrong paths, slowing them down. "We need to go northwest," Sarah said quietly, after they'd been walking for about 15 minutes and hadn't found the first victim yet. "This direction is going south." "I'm reading the map," Marcus said. "I've got this." 5 minutes later, they were clearly lost. "We're heading the wrong way," Sarah said. "We're running out of time." Marcus looked at the map again. He realized Sarah was right. He handed her the map. "You take it then." Sarah took the map. She oriented it correctly, found their location, and identified the fastest route to the first simulated victim. Her team moved differently with her leading. They moved with purpose and speed, but also with caution, exactly the way a trained, tactical team moves. They found the first victim in 16 minutes. They found the second in 22 minutes. The third took another 19 minutes, but they still had time. What happened in the third location, though, that changed everything. As they were extracting the final simulated victim from a ravine, Marcus's foot slipped on a rock. He started to fall, genuinely lose his footing, heading down toward the water about 15 feet below. Sarah moved. She didn't think about it. She didn't hesitate. She reached out and grabbed his arm, her other hand finding the rock face, and she held him there. Not easily, but definitely, with complete control, using her strength and her training. Marcus hung there for a moment, suspended above the water, held up by Sarah's grip. Then she pulled him back up to solid ground. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Marcus was breathing hard. He was also understanding something fundamental about the person he'd been trying to prove something to. "Thanks," he said finally. "Yeah," Sarah said. She let go of his arm. "Let's get back." They made it back to the extraction point with 45 seconds to spare. Captain Torres was waiting. "Good work out there," he said, checking their time. "You got all 3 victims out safely and you made good time, but more than that, you worked as a team. That's what this is about." Sarah didn't say anything. She was watching Marcus's face. Later, back at the barracks, Marcus was sitting alone on the bench outside when Sarah came walking back from dinner. He looked like he'd been waiting for her. "I owe you an apology," he said. Sarah sat down next to him. "For what?" "For setting you up," Marcus said. "For running at you at baseball, for planning to embarrass you in the training exercise, for being an idiot about all of this." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I appreciated you saying that." "I want to know," Marcus said, "and I'm asking as someone who genuinely wants to know, not as someone trying to cause problems. What's your background? Who are you really?" Sarah looked out at the base, at the buildings and the open spaces, at the life she'd built here away from the spotlight, away from the people who knew her story. "I'm someone who likes to be left alone," she said. "I'm someone who doesn't see any point in making a big deal about anything. I'm someone who just wants to do the job and go home at the end of the day." "But the stuff you can do," Marcus said. "That's just training," Sarah said. "That's something anyone can learn if they put in the work." Marcus didn't believe that, but he also understood that Sarah wasn't going to say more. "Well," he said, "whatever you are, I'm sorry. I learned something today." "What did you learn?" Sarah asked. "That when you don't know what someone is capable of, the smart thing is to be respectful," Marcus said, "not to try to prove something." The incident in the ravine happened on Friday. By Monday, the story had reached the ears of everyone on the base. The military is like any other close community in that way. News travels fast, and stories get bigger with each telling. By the time the story had made it through the barracks twice, Sarah had apparently pulled Marcus up from a 100-foot fall using only her pinky finger. But the core of the story was true. Sarah had saved Marcus's life, and that simple fact had changed how a lot of people on the base thought about her. What nobody expected was that the story would reach the ears of someone it shouldn't have. Major Jonathan Pierce was the base security officer. He was the person responsible for managing classified personnel assignments, personnel with special capabilities, and anything that involved military intelligence on the base. He was also the person who would have been briefed about Sarah Chen's actual background and assignment. The thing was, nobody had briefed him. Major Pierce had no record of Sarah Chen being anyone special. She was just a logistics officer, a transfer from San Diego, normal background, normal training, normal everything. But then he started hearing these stories. Stories about her physical capabilities. Stories about things she could do that seemed beyond what a normal logistics officer should be able to do. And most importantly, stories about combat techniques and tactical awareness that suggested someone with specialized military training. Major Pierce was a careful man. He didn't like mysteries. He didn't like gaps in his record keeping. So he did what any thorough officer would do. He started asking questions. He pulled Sarah's file on Monday afternoon. He reviewed her jacket, her training records, her previous assignments. And he noticed something that immediately raised red flags. There were gaps. Periods of time that weren't accounted for in detail. Assignments that were marked as classified but didn't have explanatory notes in his system. This was unusual. It suggested that Sarah's background involved operations or training that were compartmentalized at a higher level than Major Pierce's clearance. He made some calls Tuesday morning. He called the Naval Station San Diego, where Sarah had been previously assigned. He spoke with her former commanding officer, Captain Robert Williams. "Sir, I'm calling about Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Major Pierce said. She transferred to my base about a month ago, and I'm noticing some gaps in her file that I'm trying to fill in. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Major, Sarah's background is compartmentalized, Captain Williams said finally. I can't provide specific details over an unsecured line, but I can tell you that her clearance level is higher than base security officer level. Anything that's marked classified in her file should remain classified. This confirmed what Major Pierce had suspected. Sarah wasn't what she appeared to be. But instead of letting it go, instead of respecting the compartmentalization and the classified nature of her background, Major Pierce became more interested. He reached out to some contacts in military intelligence. He made some inquiries, and after a few calls, he started to piece together what he was pretty sure Sarah actually was. He was pretty sure she was a SEAL. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The way she moved, the way she carried herself, the stories about what she could do, and most importantly, the gaps in her file and the classified markings that suggested she'd been involved in operations that went beyond routine military service. By Wednesday afternoon, Major Pierce had convinced himself that he knew exactly who Sarah was and what she was. And he decided that this was a problem that needed to be addressed. He called Sarah to his office Wednesday at 1600 hours. When Sarah arrived, she found Major Pierce sitting behind his desk, looking serious and official. There was another officer in the room with him, someone Sarah didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Chen," Major Pierce said, "this is Colonel David Hansen from Military Intelligence. He's here to help clarify some matters regarding your background and your assignment to this base." Sarah's expression didn't change, but her body language shifted. She stood at a perfect posture, completely still. "Sir, if there's a question about my assignment or my clearance," Sarah said, "I'd be happy to clarify through proper channels, but I would request that this conversation involve my commanding officer and that we follow appropriate security protocols." "We're following appropriate protocols," Major Pierce said. "Colonel Hansen has the necessary clearance." "I don't believe Colonel Hansen has been properly introduced through my chain of command," Sarah said, and her voice was very polite but also very firm. "I would prefer to not discuss any details about my background or previous assignments until I've had a chance to verify his authority and speak with my commanding officer." Colonel Hansen leaned forward. "Lieutenant, I'm here to help. We've noticed some inconsistencies in your file and we just need to clarify a few things." "Then we should do this with my commanding officer present," Sarah said. She didn't sit down, she didn't relax her stance. "And with proper documentation." Major Pierce was frustrated now. "Lieutenant, I'm trying to be reasonable about this. We know you're not a typical logistics officer. We know you have combat training that goes beyond what your official file suggests. We just want to understand your background." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Sir, with respect, what you're describing is speculation. My assignment to this base was approved through appropriate channels. My clearance level was approved through appropriate channels. If there are questions about either of those things, then the appropriate place to address them is through my chain of command." "And who is your chain of command?" Colonel Hansen asked. "Captain Elizabeth Torres," Sarah said, and above her Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hammond. "We've already talked to Captain Torres," Major Pierce said. "She said that she has no specific knowledge of your previous assignments and that those are classified above her level." "Then I think that answers your question about whether I should be discussing them," Sarah said. Major Pierce leaned back in his chair. He was annoyed now, but he was also understanding that Sarah wasn't going to voluntarily give him any information. "Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to tell you something as a matter of courtesy," he said. "If you're here with classified assignments that you haven't properly reported to base security, that's a problem. If you're operating with a higher clearance level than your file indicates, that's a problem. And if you're not being transparent about your background, all of that is a problem." "I understand your concerns, sir," Sarah said, "and I'm happy to address them through the appropriate channels. Is that all?" Major Pierce dismissed her, but he was clearly not happy. That evening, Sarah made a phone call. She called a secure number that she'd been given years ago. It was a number that reached the right people, the people who oversaw operations, the people who knew who she really was. Within an hour, she had a call back. The next morning, Thursday, there was a phone call to Captain Torres from someone at SEAL Team Command. Then Captain Torres called Major Pierce. "Major," she said, "I need to discuss some matters regarding Lieutenant Sarah Chen." By Friday morning, Major Pierce had received a strongly worded email from 2 levels above his command. The email made it clear that Lieutenant Sarah Chen's background and previous assignments were compartmentalized for reasons of national security. The email made it clear that asking questions about those assignments was not appropriate. The email made it clear that Sarah's presence on the base was authorized and approved, and that there would be no further inquiries. The email also suggested, very politely, that Major Pierce had overstepped his authority. Major Pierce was humiliated. He had tried to do his job, or so he told himself, and he'd been shut down. More than that, he'd been told, in effect, that he didn't have high enough clearance to know what was actually happening on his own base. He kept his frustration to himself, though. He knew better than to argue with national security directives, but it bothered him. It bothered him enough that when someone from the local news came sniffing around the base, a week later asking questions about military personnel, he made a decision that would change everything. The reporter's name was Jessica Martinez. She worked for a regional news station out of Charlotte, and she had a side interest in stories about military operations, military personalities, and military secrets. She'd been calling around the base trying to get a story about budget cuts in the logistics department. It was supposed to be a normal human interest piece about how the military was cutting corners. But Jessica wasn't just interested in budget cuts. When Major Pierce contacted her through an intermediary, when he told her that there was a very interesting story on the base if she wanted to dig for it, Jessica took the bait. He didn't tell her specifics. He just told her that there was a highly trained military operative working in a position that didn't match her background, and that when he'd tried to find out more, he'd been told to back off by people way up the chain of command. He suggested that there were questions about security protocols and transparency. He suggested that this might be a story about someone working on the base who wasn't supposed to be there, or who shouldn't have the access she had. He was, essentially, using a reporter to accomplish what official channels had told him to stop doing. Jessica Martinez was smart. She knew that if the military didn't want information to come out, there was usually a reason. But she also knew that asking the right questions of the right people could sometimes get answers. She started making calls. She contacted other military personnel who'd worked with Sarah. She dug into publicly available records. She did the kind of research that a determined journalist can do. By the following week, she had enough to go with a story. "Female combat operative stationed at Fort Liberty," the headline read. The article discussed the presence of a highly trained female military member on the base, noted the apparent security review, and suggested that questions were being asked about her background and her assignment. The article didn't name Sarah directly, but anyone on the base would have known immediately who it was about. The story caused an immediate uproar. Military personnel are trained to be cautious about security breaches, and the idea that someone's classified background was being discussed in the media triggered alarm bells everywhere. Within hours, the base commander was demanding answers. Within 2 hours, there was an investigation opened into how classified information had been disclosed. By that afternoon, Major Pierce was being questioned about his contact with the journalist. He tried to deny it at first. He insisted that he had never spoken to Jessica Martinez, that he had nothing to do with the story. But the phone records told a different story. The intermediary he'd used, a civilian contractor who worked on the base, rolled over quickly when confronted by military investigators. By Friday morning, Major Pierce was being escorted from the base. He was facing a formal investigation for violating security protocols, for attempting to circumvent classified assignment procedures, and for disclosing national security information to the media. His military career, at least his career at Fort Liberty, was over. But the fallout extended far beyond Major Pierce. The story had gone national. CNN picked it up. Fox News picked it up. Every major news outlet in the country started running versions of the story. "Female Navy SEAL operating on Army base," read one headline. "Military secrets and security breaches," read another. The Pentagon was forced to issue a statement confirming that, yes, Lieutenant Sarah Chen was a Navy SEAL, and yes, she had been temporarily assigned to Fort Liberty for training and coordination purposes. The statement said nothing more, but it didn't need to. Everyone understood what had happened. Sarah had been trying to keep her head down, to do her job quietly, to not draw attention to herself. But the military and the media and the public didn't always let people do that. Within 48 hours of the Pentagon's statement, Sarah was informed that her assignment to Fort Liberty was being terminated. She would return to San Diego and to regular SEAL team operations. But before she left, there was a formal hearing into the security breach. Sarah was asked to testify about how her background had been disclosed, about her interactions with Major Pierce, and about the attempts to access her classified files. She sat in a formal military hearing room in front of a panel of officers, and she told the truth about what had happened. Major Pierce asked questions about my background, she said. I declined to answer and directed him to use appropriate channels. He then contacted representatives from military intelligence who confirmed that my background was compartmentalized and classified. He was informed through proper channels that his inquiries should cease. And then he contacted the media, one of the panel officers said. That would appear to be the case, Sarah said. Though I don't have direct knowledge of his communication with the press, that's something your investigation will have to determine. The hearing concluded. The investigators determined that Major Pierce had indeed been the source of the information that led to the news story. He had violated multiple security protocols. He had disclosed classified information to the media. He would face a military court-martial. When it was all over, Sarah packed her gear and prepared to leave the base. On her last day, Marcus came to see her off. He found her at the motor pool loading her duffel bag into her truck. I wanted to say goodbye, he said. Hey, Marcus, Sarah said. She smiled at him, genuinely smiled. I also wanted to apologize again, Marcus said, for all the stuff at the beginning, and to say that I'm sorry it ended like this. I know this wasn't your fault. It's okay, Sarah said. These things happen. I'm just glad nobody else got hurt in the fallout. What's going to happen to you? Marcus asked. I'm heading back to my regular assignment, Sarah said. Back to my team, I'll be fine. For what it's worth, Marcus said, I learned a lot from you, not just that day in training, but from knowing you, from watching how you handled everything. You taught me something about character, about how to act when things get hard. Sarah closed her truck door. Just remember, she said, most of the time, when you don't know what someone is capable of, the smartest thing is just to show them respect. People are usually more than what they appear to be on the surface. Yeah, Marcus said, I know that now. Sarah drove off the base at 900 hours on a Monday morning, heading back to San Diego, heading back to her team, heading back to the life she actually lived when she wasn't trying to be invisible. But the story of what happened at Fort Liberty didn't end there. 3 weeks later, Jessica Martinez released an expanded version of her original story. This time it told the full account of what had happened. Not just that there was a female SEAL on the base, but that there had been harassment, that there had been an attempt to humiliate someone without knowing who they were, and that it had all led to a security breach that resulted in someone's career ending. The story framed it as a cautionary tale about respect, about assumptions, and about how underestimating someone can lead to dangerous consequences. The story also interviewed soldiers from Fort Liberty, including Marcus, who talked about the experience of learning who Sarah actually was, and what that meant about respect and character. The article went viral. It was picked up by other outlets. It was discussed on morning shows. And interestingly, it wasn't presented as a scandal. It was presented as an interesting human interest story about a soldier doing her job professionally, without drawing attention to herself, and about what happens when people make assumptions about other people. Major Pierce's court-martial happened 2 months after Sarah left the base. He was convicted of violating security protocols and discharged from the military. He served no prison time, but his military career was effectively over, and he would carry the mark of his conviction with him for the rest of his life. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had tried to prove something. He had tried to find information that he thought should be available to him, and in doing so, he had destroyed his own career. Sarah, meanwhile, returned to her SEAL team. She went back to the work she actually did, the classified operations, the training, the life of being a combat operative. She went back to the thing she was actually built for. And while she was back in San Diego, doing her job, living her life, she thought sometimes about Fort Liberty. She thought about Marcus learning to show respect. She thought about Henderson and Jake and the other soldiers who had seen her do something and had questions about who she was. She thought about the lesson they had learned, that people are more than what they appear to be, and that the safe bet is always to treat people with respect, because you never know what they're actually capable of. 6 months after leaving Fort Liberty, Sarah received a letter. It was from Marcus. He told her that he'd been promoted to staff sergeant. He told her that he'd been working on being a better leader, someone who didn't assume things about people, someone who treated everyone with respect regardless of how they appeared on the surface. He told her that she'd taught him something important, and he wanted her to know that. Sarah read the letter twice. Then she put it in a drawer in her apartment in San Diego, in a place where she kept the things that mattered to her. Because that was the thing about being who Sarah was, about having the skills and the training and the capability that she had. The victory wasn't in proving she could do something or in making someone look bad. The victory was in understanding that respect matters, that character matters, that the way you treat people, even the people you don't understand, matters. Sarah had spent 8 years training to be one of the most capable soldiers in the United States military. She had spent years learning how to handle threats, how to make tactical decisions, how to perform under pressure. But the real victory at Fort Liberty had nothing to do with combat or tactics. The real victory was in showing a group of soldiers that assumptions don't matter, that quiet strength is real strength, that the person you're underestimating might be the person who saves your life. And that was enough. Years later, when people asked Marcus about his time at Fort Liberty, he would tell them about the new transfer who had quietly done her job, who had shown respect even when she was disrespected, and who had taught him a lesson about character that he would carry with him for the rest of his military career. He would tell them about the day in the ravine when he realized that the quiet girl from the logistics office was someone special. He would tell them about learning that respect is something you show to everyone, not just the people who prove they deserve it. And he would tell them about the letter he'd written her, telling her that she'd made him a better person. Because in the end, that's what Sarah's story was really about. Not about being tough or being capable or being able to do things that other people couldn't do. It was about how one person, by living with integrity and respect and character, could change the way other people saw the world. It was about how being underestimated can actually be an advantage, because it gives you the chance to show people who you really are without the pressure of expectation. And it was about how sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply be who they are, fully and completely, and let that speak for itself. Sarah went back to her regular life, back to her team, back to her missions, back to the work that defined her. But she carried Fort Liberty with her in the way that experiences do. And Marcus carried his lesson with him too, in the way that important lessons do. In the end, that was the real story, not the scandal or the security breach or the investigation. The real story was about respect, about character, and about what happens when someone shows you who they really are and you actually pay attention.